Hi everybody, welcome back for another video. I've discovered a couple key points that you need to pay really close attention to with your TCP. Let's discuss. Let me take you through a little tour of the TCP as I've got it laid out here. So now you can see all the internals within the context of the upper frame. We've got the Grimburg barrel in there, and I've got the hole that the Grimburg barrel uses. I've got it lined up with the hole in which it goes in here. So that's where the screw hole would be. Here's your breech, and it's also lined up with the breech. I've got the regulator here. This is your sear spring and your sear, and it lines up with your bolt, this rim of the bolt. And you've got the air chamber and this end cap exactly flush with the end, and the bolt would sit right here, and the bolt would be up against the sear, and the bolt would be positioned exactly at this position relative to the barrel. And so there's a couple points that I want to make here, and the one is based on my prior video where I was talking about the spring, and I was talking about how not to compress your spring all the way when you fire the bolt. Well, when I look at this, it looks to me like the bolt really does not move that much. In fact, the bolt is partially in the edge of the breech. But one of the things that I'm noticing is that because the tolerance in the Grimburg barrel is so tight, there is wear on the bolt. And you can see that there is about I measured it, there's about a 5 millimeter area of wear. You can see the color change between this region and the rest of the bolt. And so I believe that the bolt is going in about 5 millimeters from this position. So it's really not compressing the VKS spring very much. It's doing a really good job of keeping it from going in too far, but it is going into the barrel, and it is scratching, and I'll show you a closer view in a second. But what I wanted you to see is the big picture. This is what we're talking about. When you pull the trigger and you release the sear, you just allow that bolt to go forward about 5 millimeter and then right back. So it's a very brief period of time, and it's a very short distance that's moved. You really are only moving just enough that you can allow the pin, the firing pin, to move out from the end of the barrel, end of the air chamber here, just enough that all of the air that is in the air pressure in the firing chamber can be released, and then it can be quickly resealed. And so it's just a quick open and a quick close, and that's what we're doing. So there's really not a massive movement, but it is enough. As you can see here, you can see the wear. I think under this light you can see it fairly well. And I'll show you in comparison. This is a brand new bolt. So we'll put a brand new bolt right next to it. And I think you can see the brand new bolt has no wear because it hasn't been used. And whereas the bolt that has been firing and going into this barrel has a wear, and I measured about 5 millimeter. So the new bolt, as you can see, there's no wear. And let's pull this one up. And you can see here, not only is there some wear, but it's scratching along this edge. It's wearing. So I don't know how much that's gonna impact the long-term life of this bolt because it is very tight. So let me get you a different angle. Okay, we're back up here, and this is the same bolt I was just showing you. And then this is the brand new one. And you can see side by side, probably not nearly as good in this light, but you can see that wear. And so I don't know, you know, people have a lot of problems with their bolts and the firing pin, and this is certainly the weakest link of the entire system is this interaction between a concern about hitting the bolt scratching or colliding, and as you can see, it's starting out about right here, and then it's sliding, but you can see that there's wear.
But it does fit. It does fit. It's a really tight tolerance up to about right here. And well, I guess that's the detent. So it can't go in any further, but it will go in, as you can see here. So, but it will make contact as well. It's just really tight. So it's going to scratch. So I don't want to overemphasize that point, but it is wearing more than you might expect. So I would imagine that lubing this very well would be very important, and that's something that I'm going to make a goal to do. I usually lube this part very well, and I lube the inside, and I lube the shaft here of the air chamber so that this slides very well, and that's with the Dye-Slick lube. But I don't usually pay a lot of attention to the very end, and I think that's really important that we lube this very well. That's really the moving part. That's really the biggest concern in terms of reliability, is that constant. It's a 5 millimeter forward and back, forward and back, forward and back every time you shoot. And it seems like a pretty good system. It seems pretty reliable, and in fact it is 99.9% reliable, but occasionally that firing pin will give trouble. And this firing pin has been Loctited from my last video, and I've been firing it as you've seen in other videos, and it's still holding up really great. So I'm very happy with that. Looks like in my case the Loctite is working so far. You know, with these we just have to take extra precaution. We take them apart to really check them out. So now we also move to the regulator. I thought it would be good for me to just take a few minutes to explain the regulator function. And the beauty of this system, and that's why I like the Tiberius First Strike Pepperball system, the way it's set up. The regulator is really well designed, and it's pretty robust. And other than upgrading the springs, as I've talked about before, the regulator is really well built, and it really does a good job. And it's this half of the regulator, this part, is what's controlling the velocity settings, and being able to change the velocity externally through this screw is really a nice advantage. And you know, other markers, you might have to take them apart, and you might have to open a clamshell and to modify the velocity. This one you can turn it up, you can turn it down, you can tune it to how you like it depending on the barrel you're using. You know, if the barrel is longer or shorter, you may want to make adjustments, and it's certainly much easier. And there is an optimal velocity for your particular situation and your particular CO2 and your particular barrel. So you don't necessarily always want this completely deleted and not able to regulate velocity, but you could delete one half or the other. There's a ball valve here, and on this side is a spring pad and a spring, and on this side is a ball and a ball valve and some other O-rings, and then there's a cap, and you can also take those parts out. Now you could delete that entire part, and you could then have a unregulated system, or you could really shore up this system by essentially replacing the spring with something else to fill the space, like Belleville washers or something like that. I don't want to do either one. I want to use this system. And what I'm going to do is I've previously shown you videos where this is shooting with the 5-inch barrel at about 36 joules. And I always get questions about how many turns that is. Well, what I'm going to do is show you how many turns it takes for me to unscrew this back out to flush. So let's see. So we'll start out right here, and we'll turn counterclockwise. That's 1. Here's 2. Here's 3. Here's 4. And it should turn easily. 5. Here's 6. Here's 7. Here's 8. Here's 9. And you can see that it's very much there, but I think 10 is just about right. And so I think I've been telling you correctly. I've told multiple people in the comments it was about 10 turns in, and so you can see here that is now flush. And so 10 turns in from flush with this regulator will get you about 36 joules from the Grimburg barrel and a 12-gram CO2. Now it takes a couple more turns to get the whole thing out, but we'll take it out because I'm gonna take a look. I haven't been in here in a while. And you can see what's inside is a spring. And I actually have two shims, and I'll show you that in a second, but I have a spring, a very oily spring. And then inside is the regulator spring pad. And so these are really what you need to get down in here. This makes it a lot easier, and then you can just pull out your spring pad. And it's very helpful in the VKS because you don't have anything that you could really grab with something else, but these are very useful. And so now here's my regulator spring pad, and it's also well lubed, and I've got a O-ring on there. That's also an upgraded O-ring that's different from the stock. And these are flask paintball O-rings upgraded. These are Buna in, and I like them. This one fits really well. I have no issues at all with it. And I keep this, all of this well lubed. You want it really well lubed. And I also add two shims. These are, the advantage is not so much for power, and I will give the information on these in the description, but I put these go at the end as a shim for the spring, and basically provides just that little extra distance when you screw in your spring. And the reason why that's an advantage is because when this is here and the spring gets compressed under the air pressure, this spring undergoes a compression. And if your velocity setting is such that you've really screwed this in, that your spring is almost bottomed out, under pressure when it's gassed up, what can happen, and now if I remove the spring, what can happen is that this can make contact, and there can be contact there. And you don't want that contact happening, especially under pressure. And this is usually only if you've maxed out your velocity setting and you're using high pressure. Maybe not so much an issue for a 12-gram CO2. But if this touches, you're going to also create problems. And so having that shim there provides just that extra space that will, when the spring gets compressed, it will provide enough of a space for this to go down a little bit further and not touch. And so that's the biggest advantage for somebody who really wants to max out power. But there's no harm having them in there, and they may provide a slight amount of extra tension for your spring. And we know from regulators in general that springs can add to your strength and your air output from regulator tanks, and having these two shims in there can't hurt. Although I can't say that it's added anything significantly. I haven't done plus and minus the shim to see, but it is one way to protect the end of your spring pad and not to cause any problem there. So other than that, that's basically the gutted area. Yeah, so you just put a little of the laceration grease on there. I like to really make sure that this O-ring is really coated well, because I think there is a little bit of wobble in this O-ring. It's not a perfect fit, and in theory, if you're really pushing the air pressure, this O-ring is one of the weak links in the system because it could blow. And if anybody that's got their O-ring and they take it out and you examine, you can see that it's not, there's a little bit of wobble, but I think this flask O-ring is definitely better than the stock. And if you put some laceration grease on there from First Strike and really just coat it well, I think that's the way to go. You want something that's going to last, because you're not going to be going into this regulator and doing this every time. I don't routinely do it every time. And then I put laceration grease out here as well. And you use this stuff for non-moving parts. This really doesn't move, like don't use this kind of stuff on your firing bolt. If you do, your velocity will drop, and you'll find it is just sticky and it does not, you know, glide the way it's supposed to. But for this, it's actually perfect, and I think that's really what this stuff is perfect for. So that's what I use it for. And so we're going to take that and we're going to drop it back down in the hole like this, and you just push it straight in. And then you want to take your spring and also grease it up as well. These things are under high tension and high pressure, and they're compressing. And I think just having it lubed well with some laceration grease will improve the lifespan of the spring. And so we take the spring now, and it goes right in on top, and that's just going to push everything down. And then I've got my two shims. Those go then on top of the spring, just like that, and these shims fit perfectly. And then we put the screw back in, and very carefully not to cross thread it. That's really important. Get it in there, you know, when it drops in, and you can tell that it's turning nice and easy. Then we just take our, see how it's turning very easily. That's what you want. You don't want any problems there. Now you get it to about flush, exactly flush, and then I'm going to switch to the other side, and I'm going to give it, first I'm going to clean my hands because my hands are extremely slippery. And now we're going to go back in 10 turns. So from here, we're going to go clockwise. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And it's just starting to get a little tight at 10. And I can't tell you how many more that has. I don't recommend going all the way in. I recommend using a chronograph to set the velocity that you want, that's optimal for your setup. But there really is very little need to max this out, because you're just gonna get 1 or 2 good shots and then everything's gonna crash. So I think find something, or, you know, try 10 if you like that. That's what I use. That's a great compromise. But the regular lubing of these outside parts, checking and inspecting and making sure that everything looks good and there's no gunk in there and everything fires okay. And mine is really in great shape as far as I can tell. And then lube that, and then lube the firing bolt as well. And for that, we use I use the Dye-Slick lube. I really like this. This is it's just not as thick as the First Strike laceration ointment. You don't want to use that. So for this, you really just want to put some onto the shaft of the air chamber. And the first thing you want to do is put your bumpers back on before you do that. Otherwise, what's going to happen is it'll just scrape them right off. So you've got your 2 air bumpers, and you're going to put them on and make sure they're in the right orientation when they go on. They should be in that direction and not that direction. And they have a natural direction in which they go. And if it goes the wrong direction, you need to do it again. And I can't remember if I did this on the previous video or not. But you just put some of this on there and then start just twisting and getting it nice and lubed, and also down inside. And that's really all you need on that. And then I use that as well on these O-rings, and just make sure it's all just nice and lubed. So put a little bit more on my fingers, and then lube these 2 as well. And that's pretty much get your engine, your firing air chamber pretty much lubed as well as you can. And then you really need to pay attention to your heat core O-ring on the inside here. That one you can't use the cream, but you use just some operator tears and put a few drops in and rotate it around. And you just want to make sure that that one is well lubed, because that one is one that you don't ever want to dry out, because if it blows, you definitely will lose all of your air. So you get that lubed well, and got this outside lubed. And then I also put some on the inside of the bolt, and just a little bit, and then use my finger to turn it around on the inside, because this is going to be sliding as well, and so you want both of those to be nice and lubed, and you just want it to go nice and smooth, and that's really what you're looking for. And that's the definition of a bolt that's lubed and ready to go. And so, as what we were talking about earlier, I think it's a good idea to now also consider the outside of this, lube this well. So let's put a little bit more on there, because I don't normally do that. And let's start right up here where it's rubbing, and let's lube that part with some Di-Slick lube, as well as the entire thing, because it's going in a certain distance, but you know, it could vary. I really don't know. That's where it's wearing, but just because it's wearing right here does not mean that it's not going in there. So I think, but otherwise it does look pretty good everywhere else. And so that's that. Engine is ready to go and be reinstalled into the base, and I think that's pretty straightforward. At that point, you just want to make sure that you have the bolt forward. The other thing I do is on the opposite end of the regulator, I will use a dime, and I will open that up and put in some operator tears oil on the O-rings that are in there. I don't usually take all the parts out, because I don't think it's necessary, but you just carefully take that cap off, and then inside you've got a spring, and you've got you know, a ball valve. And I just to be safe, put a drop of oil down into the spring, and then just recap it very carefully. And you have to make sure also that it's in there, going in the right way, and you're not cross-threading. There is possibly oil that, you know, in this regulator that does get kind of grimy, and there is possibility of something that we really have to consider, that the metal on metal, that there can be small fragments of metal that get in your regulator, and that's why at high power and high pressure, these things are really important to be meticulously cleaned, because a tiny little grit and things can get in, and the metal on metal can create a paste with the grease, and over time and with pressure it can create a more of a black gummy substance, and so now I have it completely back together.